Hi everyone, welcome to From Overwhelmed to Empowered, AI's real-world impact on Citizens Advice Scotland. Welcome to Andy Bell, Natasha Gilmour and George Holmes, and today we're going to discuss the journey of implementing HelpFirst, an innovative AI-powered system at Citizens Advice Scotland. Hopefully this will be a rare behind-the-scenes look at the challenges of integrating large language model technology into a high-stakes environment serving vulnerable citizens. We'll draw from extensive user testing and real-world applications, and hopefully candidly discuss lots of aspects of the implementation. And we'll hopefully offer you some actionable insights to your organisation as well. So maybe if everyone could introduce themselves, I'll go first. I'm Angela Bradbury, first, I'm COO, and I'll hand on to Andy.
Hi, my name is Andy Bell. I'm the CEO at HelpFirst, and I've been helping build the system with Citizens Advice Scotland for the last 15 months.
Hi, I'm Natasha Gilmour. I'm Head of Operational Support at Citizens Advice Scotland with overall responsibility for the delivery of the Extra Help Unit, which is a complaints team based in Glasgow that supports consumers across Great Britain with energy and postal complaints.
Hi, and I'm George Holmes. I'm the Operations Manager at the Extra Help Unit, and I've been helping Andy and Angela at the ground on this project and helping lead to bring it to life.
Great, thanks everyone. So maybe Andy, if you could kick off with a little kind of introduction of the project.
Yeah, sure. So I've just got a little presentation to share. 2 seconds. Citizens Advice Scotland came to us 15 months ago with a challenge asking how they could better identify vulnerable clients in a situation where all the clients coming in were vulnerable. The particular problem was with the cost of living crisis over the last couple of winters, there'd been a huge uptick in the amount of incoming requests, and just really wanted to improve their safeguarding and make sure they were no one was slipping through the net. We were able to build a system that did 3 basic things. It's looking at prioritization, visualization, summarization. And to show what that meant in this example, I'll just give you a little run through of the typical user journey at Extra Help Unit. So Extra Help Unit is a second line energy support system, primarily over the phone. It's about 50 to 60 people working, taking calls from across the UK. The person who might phone in is someone like Dan. Dan lost his job a couple of months ago. He's got 2 kids, one of whom's diabetic, so relies on insulin being kept in the fridge. He's 2 weeks ago, he got a disconnection letter from his energy supplier, and that's starting to play on his mind. He's really quite stressed and nervous. That's a typical call you might deal with at EHU. 5 minutes later, you might get a call from Fatima. She's a pensioner with COPD. 5 minutes later, you might get a call from Susie. She's got a newborn and can't afford to turn the radiators on. In fact, the average Extra Help Unit caseworker is dealing with between 50 and 70 cases at any time. And that's an awful lot to hold in your head, particularly when each one might have between 10 to 50 pages of notes, because it's a referral service, so there's a lot of information getting referred. And you don't get a pictogram of each person like this. One caseworker described the situation as name soup. So you log in the morning, you come back after lunch, and there's this wall of different people who need looking after. It's really hard to prioritize. There's a couple of things we've been able to do at HelpFirst. So we've built a large language model powered plugin which sits inside their case management system. The first thing it does is create a prioritization. So we've worked very hard with George and Natasha and the entire team to work out the prioritization and then reverse engineer it so that we're picking up the signals via a large language model of all the text and then recreating a prioritization that accords with their processes. The second feature, and this is the one the caseworkers really like, is what we call risk alerts. So if we go back to Dan, he's a level 1 immediate priority because he's got that combination of threat of disconnection and there's a medical reason he needs the electricity to be on. But the really useful feature is these risk alerts. So we've defined 8 different risk alerts, which may be, so any of these 8 risk alerts might be showing. In this instance, there's 4, and you can roll over it. So you get a nice little aid memoir that reminds you, okay, oh yeah, Dan, he's the person who needed a fridge for his son's insulin. We've been building this now for the best part of a year, and we're delighted that it's just getting into production now. We've done an awful lot on evaluation of the caliber of the predictions to make sure they're really good enough to be used in this environment. There's 2 types of evaluation we've done. One is a kind of machine learning prediction, so looking at precision, recall, accuracy, F1 score, confusion matrices. The other type of analysis I'm really interested in is more like a user level analysis. So working with a handful of experienced caseworkers to say, is this visualization, is the HelpFirst system making their lives better? And you can see we've had this iterative approach. So in May, when we first rolled it out to a handful of people on a trial basis, it was there was as many reds as there were greens, and then over time we've been able to improve it till by the end of August, everyone who was using it was saying it made their life better on all these different regards. That's a quick overview of what we're doing, and hopefully that'll tee up the conversation.
Great, thanks, Andy. So I was wondering if we could just go back to the kind of why of the project, and maybe if each of you could give a bit of background on how you came to be involved in it in the first place and what you're hoping would happen. Maybe we'll start with you, Natasha.
Sure. Yeah, we got involved in the Scottish Government CivTech programme because that they were offering funding to basically how you can transform lives with technology. And at that very moment in time, we were, as Andy's mentioned, we were struggling in terms of our workloads, the cost of living crisis. And we went from a position where, well, our demand had increased dramatically, but also the type of work that we were supporting consumers with had changed quite dramatically. So around normally 30% of our work related to complaints that were linked to priority issues where somebody was on the verge of disconnection. There was a real risk. We had to act urgently to try and keep somebody on supply. And that went up to around 70 to 80% of our work. So we were really struggling to keep up with that demand. And people were very distressed. And the concern at that point was, it was take us longer to deal with those cases. And the concern always is, if you're taking longer, and every single case that we deal with, there is a vulnerability with a statutory service supporting people in vulnerable circumstances, how do you prioritise them? And we needed a better system to make sure that if there was anyone, even if you think about, we've got the energy systems or the energy issues, but we also had the safeguarding element of somebody potentially at risk of harm, suicidal. So say, for example, somebody had emailed us in. We can't look at an email, every second of the day, particularly not when we're massively busy. So that was a risk to us. It was a risk to our consumers, a risk to our team, a risk to us organisationally. So we felt it was a gap there that we needed help with. And I think the big thing when we started this conversation was we didn't know what the answers were, and we worked and identified yourselves to help us work to a solution. And that's been the fantastic work that's happened over the over a year that we've all been working together.
So yeah, over to me. So like you're saying, Angela, we got involved. Sorry?
I think there's a bit of a delay on my connection.
All right, no problem. So yeah, just to complement Tasha said, like we went through some really difficult years in terms of the development of dynamics. And obviously in terms of the team, so like we had COVID, the cost of living crisis, and then we implemented the new system. And the Extra Help Unit had never had a new system put in place for years. We kind of struggled from a development side. So all of a sudden we were sitting with a system we could develop. So after introducing that, we partnered up with the CivTech project. CAS, Citizens Advice Scotland, had done a few of these, and our colleague got us involved, and it did literally sit. I can remember myself, Natasha, and a few other colleagues in a room talking to somebody from CivTech, mapping out what our challenges were at that point, and very quickly we were thrown into this process, and basically from my point of view, it was like quite fast paced, and at the beginning I kind of struggled with the idea of it and like where it would lead, but as soon as we put things down on paper and we kind of connected developing the system to the problems we had to what kind of opportunity we had here, that kind of came to life once we started speaking to partners like yourself, Andy, who did the deck there and kind of brought sort of a vision to life, and that's really when I bought in, I think, personally, and kind of took over, and I was the kind of lead on dynamics. So I think one of the big things I said, I remember going back, was that as long as it integrated to the system, I could see success, and you've obviously managed to do that. So it's great, yeah.
Nice. And yourself, Andy?
For me, the enthusiasm was I was just so excited by the launch of ChatGPT and this step change in the ability of computers to understand language. And also I had this bee in my bonnet about the UI for this could be different. And so when we came across the challenge that Citizens Advice Scotland had, it just seemed like a perfect opportunity to put together something that the kind of power of large language models, but a really different user interface paradigm. So I was just so excited to hear the challenge and to try and articulate our views about how it could be solved.
Great. And maybe, Natasha, if we could go to you for the next question. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about the challenge of having a customer base with vulnerabilities, and how that the project with the enhancing kind of fairness between customers.
Angela, could you repeat that, please? You broke up a wee bit there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the challenges of having a customer base with vulnerabilities, and how that played out in this project with the AI element as well.
Sure. It's actually it's been, I think, interesting to think about. We're used to every single case we deal with somebody being vulnerable, and then you start going, and the whole point of this project is how do we prioritise the most vulnerable? How do we help first the people that need it the most? And you know, we did have quite a lot of conversations along the way, you know, about how we do this, and there's different research, there's different approaches, but fundamentally I think we came back to, you know, the biggest risk of our service was safeguarding and the risk to life, and that was how we spoke about, you know, that had to be the utmost priority when we were looking at our prioritisation scores, and also that was the area where we couldn't pick that up instantly from a case categorisation. It was the one that could be missed by human nature. Just, you know, if it's a telephone call, you're relying on a caseworker to flag that to the manager. And equally, as I said, you know, if an email comes in, you're potentially not getting that immediately. So that was always the big risk and the big opportunity that this project was bringing to, you know, tighten that process up. And then we worked quite, I think there was loads of different ways we thought about this, but then it was very much kind of time-based. You know, so do people need medication, a constant supply of medication? Is there risk of disconnection? Is there risk of people losing supply? And then you go into the kind of wider parameters of, well, they've got a bit more time before that might happen. And then you've got just broader complexity of the cases that we deal with. So I think we did discuss different things around, you know, and this is where it gets a bit challenging. You know, you're almost, how do you have a conversation? It's almost like competing vulnerabilities, and we really didn't want to go there and say, you know, a pensioner, for example, is more vulnerable than a person who's a young person with a young child. We very much stuck to not labelling people, but more about the timescales involved and what was needed. And I think that helped us focus on how we came up with our prioritisation scores. George, I'm not sure if you would say any more than that, because I know you worked hard on that area as well.
Yeah, I think just to complement that, you're right. We didn't want to go down that route where we were kind of like prioritising people for circumstances. We kind of moved to the route of like time-based and the ethics of that. So we stuck to what we currently do and how we triage and how it's like how near you're off the supply. If there's a safeguarding risk that we don't like, we just do that manually at the moment, and the AI is really bringing that. That's like a new feature. So I think the 5 main things that are now through the scores that were originally 1 to 5 are now the HelpFirst scores, and they match exactly how we have triaged effectively for about 15 years or probably longer. So I think that the fact that we've just connected to their services and worked and how we've always worked, but use the AI to make the large language model work to our strengths and I suppose getting people back on supplies, prioritising people who maybe have a complaint, who do feel a bit more anxious about it, and there is that risk to their welfare, or somebody who's just nearing off supply, and we know that we can help somebody else at the start of the day, and maybe towards the end of the day we can help them because we know that they do have supply, but we're still complementing that and getting to that priority that same day. So I think we're looking forward to it, seeing it in action properly in the winter when we are our busiest. So we could have really used that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, great. And you mentioned there, George, about kind of leaning on existing ways that you're already working. Could you talk a bit more about how the introduction of AI is kind of marrying up with the operational workflows? You know, do the advisors' roles need to change at all? Do they need more training, or is it just a case of kind of adding in a different kind of visualization?
Well, I think, yes, it's probably the latter, to be honest. When you look at it, we're bringing in a score which resonates what we do, like I was saying. So we categorise cases, generally have always done people who are off supply. That's what the DHU are set up to do and help those most vulnerable. And we've brought in this one where we probably hadn't, until I really looked at it, hadn't realised it, but the way we dealt with things in winter was if somebody was completely off supply, we knew we had to deal with them right away. And if somebody was maybe near an off supply, they said they only had a couple of days money left, and we would get to them a bit later, and the service was stretched. We tried to. The difference with this is that we had to go into every single case. To somebody manually would have to go through 200-300 cases, and at a point of crisis, you're not able to do that. Whereas HelpFirst will be able to bring that to the surface and hopefully tell us what cases are like that we need to be dealt with right away. And then if you move down the different ways we work, we've got urgent cases, so we have complaints that sit in a work basket. Generally, we deal with them 1 to 2 days, but as the service stretch, we might have like cases waiting maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 days to be allocated. And if that's showing up that somebody's got a warrant letter and it's an urgent case, instead of somebody coming across that and manually having to look through the cases, HelpFirst is going to like flag that urgency, that they've got a warrant letter. And again, the way we triage that is that we give that out with the next day. So we don't give it out on the day, but we try to give it out in the coming days as part of our allocation. And then everything else falls into that complaint basket. And then finally with the safeguarding, we just have safeguards become like a real issue. It's I think over the last few years we've seen it more and more in our services. I think because the sort of state of the country and things, the way that things have gone, that it's become a bigger and bigger part of our organisation. I think we've understood more about how our responsibilities and that side, and this is a new feature. So at the moment, people work differently. You know that humans do, that everybody does things differently. This safeguarding score is going to really align based on the conversation we've had over months and months and months what managers should be doing. So that extra training will probably more on the management side, the caseworkers, and I suppose, and finally the risk factors are just going to be really visual for people. So that we'll get the scoring side and the triage side for the managers and the caseworkers. I think that will be a wee bit different. Instead of working in date order, they'll be prioritising things as the risk, but the scores, the risk factors. When you go into a case, if you're picking up somebody's case that you are not, that's not the case that you own, or you go back to a case that you spoke to somebody 4 months ago, you'll be able to see a list of risk factors really easily, especially now without having to go through the notes to remind yourself of the circumstances of the person. I think that is really going to be powerful for the people, and I think I'm really excited to get that working in mainstream. So I think it's a kind of complement. We've really worked hard to use the technology to sort of complement what's happening rather than reinvent what we're doing.
I think as well the technology will, it'll help us with our allocation of work. You know, for example, we've got lead caseworkers. So if we feel that we're looking at a new case and there's potentially, whether it's known safeguarding or new safeguarding, you know, we've got a lead caseworker there who's, you know, more specialised to deal with more sensitive cases, so we can allocate work quicker. So people should be able to get that support as quickly as possible. But it also means if managers have got that kind of wide view of what's in somebody's caseloads, they'll be able to prompt and proactively support and understand what's sitting behind those numbers, whereas at the moment they can't really do that. So the AI will help us tremendously, I think, with supporting our team as well.
Great. I think we're all really excited about that too. Andy, I was wondering if you could maybe talk about a specific example of how feedback from the caseworkers actually made an improvement in the HelpFirst system.
Yes, I mean, I think that's been all the way through. At the start, we did an awful lot of workshops with different caseworkers to figure out, there's kind of software designer, it's always fascinating to kind of figure out the slight differences between people, what they say they're doing, and then when you do exercises to figure out what they're really doing, and you kind of really want to get to that level of precision. And then as we got further down the line, we've had to be Natasha and George and team have been very generous with their time labeling data, which is a form of feedback. And then as we rolled it out to the handful of labelers, they've been sending me emails every day on what's working, what's not working, how it can be improved.
Sorry, Andy, just for the benefit of people who don't know what labeling is, could you explain a bit about that?
I'm sorry, yeah. So labeling is, so for the sake of argument, if you think about the risk alerts, we want to know whether, for instance, a particular risk is present or not present. So is there a health risk or not a health risk? To evaluate and tune the effectiveness of the machine learning algorithms, you need to have a data set that's been labeled by experts, in this case, the Citizens Advice Extra Help Unit team. So that job of going through cases and trying to do the same job that the machine learning is going to do, that's labeling.
Great, thank you. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about data privacy and security. This is probably a question for everyone, actually. I think you've all had different sort of involvements with this. Yeah, how do you kind of handle sensitive customer information?
I can start on that. Yeah, basically, that was at the core of the design of the product. Very early, we had to do a DPIA, which is normal in these circumstances, to get a system going. And I think myself and Andy worked on that. I think it was a responsibility of our organisation to fill that out, but there's lots of questions for us to answer and to make sure that we were following data minimisation rules. And obviously with clients' data and vulnerable clients, especially in Citizens Advice, there was sensitivity around that, and we wanted to ensure that we were protecting clients' data. So I think through a long process of basically the structure of the project was a research phase. So initially, the way that was handled was Andy's team went away and looked at technically what the most secure way to do things were, and basically again, I suppose, minimising notes that we took from the cases, and then doing a thing what's called pseudonymization, and basically whatever sort of information was going to the AI and out of the system was protected and untraceable to a point that anybody that broke in or any sort of breach would be really difficult for anyone to sort of get any sort of personal data. So I think we've done really well on that, and I think we've controlled it, and most recent efforts I think has shown that all the data is flowing in our own systems. No data is leaving our Microsoft infrastructure, and it's really just down to the work that Andy's team has done, and listening to all those conversations. Although they were difficult months to get through, that once we designed the way that flowed, Andy's technical team made that happen in real life even.
Yeah, I'd say for me, there's two elements to it. There's the data privacy, and then there's also the kind of AI ethics, and those two issues we spent a lot of time on that front. And I think from our point of view, our task was to articulate the architectural decisions we were making in a way that allowed the wider stakeholders to be able to not get too caught up in the weeds, but to see the broader pictures of what we're trying to do. And so we did a lot of workshops, a lot of kind of work with Miro to try and kind of articulate what we're doing and what the precise concerns are, both around data privacy and AI ethics. And I think for me, that's one learning of the project, is to get a wide variety of people on board. It's quite a complex and time-consuming thing, because people are coming from different points of view. As a software developer, I'm kind of used to an environment where you can kind of think in code a bit more and kind of develop things as you go along. But to kind of articulate the path, get it signed off before you do it provides an extra layer of challenge.
Natasha, do you have anything to add?
No, just I think that the importance, I think, from our perspective was, was working with our data team and the DPO to make sure that, everything that needs to be considered, addressed, because none of us are DPO, data protection experts, and it's worth stating that you have to work with the experts in this area to make sure that that knowledge is applied, and we are covering all our risk, and because ultimately, if we got to the end of this project and it is fantastic, and it's, we're saying this is going to, really transform how we deliver our service, but there was a data protection concern, this wouldn't get the go ahead. So it's just really massively important to, that we've done the work with Andy and team and our data protection support, as I was saying. It's quite a complicated area, and you need that expert support.
Yeah, I really agree. And what kinds of outcomes are you all looking for from this? So are there particular metrics or results where if you really see the needle move on that, it's going to be a massive win for the organisation? Is there anything like that?
So certainly from a safeguarding perspective, what I do expect to see, Angela, is so we record the number of cases where we have made a safeguarding decision. So I expect that to increase, simply because the technology is going to be identifying, I would say, a lot more cases than we currently do through relying on staff, basically. So, and I think that will be a positive outcome, because that's what we said at the start of the project. We do expect safeguard numbers to increase and what we've logged to increase. I would expect staff to feel more confident. So see, at 5 o'clock when they finish and they switch their laptop off, I hope we do away with any sort of worry or fear about, did I get to that customer? Is there somebody sitting within those 60, 70 cases and I've not responded to them today? So I am hoping that gives that level of confidence and morale boost and de-stress that element of our work. I think that will be massively helpful, and I think, see, from a controlling our workload perspective, and be able to communicate how we're allocating our work and where we are, I think it'll just give that extra layer of confidence that while everybody in our system is in a vulnerable circumstance, we are making sure that we are helping first those that, as I was saying, that need it the most. And it'll be interesting to track, is there any changes in our KPI performance in terms of how quickly we deal with priorities, or how quickly we close cases? Is there any change in our customer satisfaction levels? These are all things that we will be able to track, and equally with morale. Although we do track staff morale, I think it'll be interesting just to be asking specific questions once we're using the system over a period of time. Genuinely, how has it changed how you feel doing your work? Because I think that is a massive bonus to the work that we've all been involved in.
Great. And have there been any other kind of maybe unexpected outcomes, good or bad, but it came up during the project where you thought, oh, wasn't expecting that to happen, but actually the technology is making this this happen? To anyone?
I think from me, like Natasha's like highlighted the main incomes that I suppose as we've gone along, there's lots of things come out. Like at the start of the project, we talked about prioritization. The fact that we're like bringing safeguarding to life, I don't think I expected to connect the scores to what we were doing. So I suppose in some ways that is unexpected, because that's just kind of happened as we go along. The fact that we're able to the HelpFirst score is going to be like everywhere and all the lists. So like the way that it's working, as you say, like Andy designed a plan right at the start and kind of a vision. Now that it's brought into dynamics, like we'll be able to, like the HelpFirst score will be in emails. So like when somebody emails back in, like Natasha was describing there, I don't think at the beginning of the project we really expected it would be as advanced as that. So like the kind of situation Natasha talked about, you get cases, I've got scores and I'm working on it. If someday we close a case, we get an email back in the winter. I suppose when we're at any point where we're really busy, if you get an email back in, you're dealing with your priorities. If you get an email back in and it flags up as a safeguarding concern, it's a priority, you'll know instantly with the HelpFirst, where before it could take you a week, it could take you 2 weeks to the sort of the process around doing that, where you would deal with it instantly. You just physically and simply couldn't do that depending on your workload. So the fact that we'll be able to get that is an unexpected benefit, and there has been loads of these come through. We've simplified the way the risk factors come out. I think the vision of that was a bit wider initially as well. So it's just right through the project there's been like it's just developed and kind of knitted it into the system. So there's been things pop out of that every day. So I think it's quite a wide question, but I think right at the start it was like a research phase, and we were just dealing with like getting a score. And so for me, there's just been lots of things when we've started to break down all the different work streams and how things connect. It's brought a surprise and unexpected benefits, and there's been some good, some bad where we've been like, we need to cut that, but more good than bad, I think, from my end.
One bit that was interesting for me was one of my colleagues always talks about implementing a machine learning project as there being a kind of element of holding a mirror up to an organization and its process. And whereas I think we spent quite a lot of time, and it's an interesting area, was some of the risk alerts were actually a lot harder to define than others. So in particular, urgency and off supply both seem like pretty self-evident concepts, but the more you dig into them, they prove really hard to give a kind of firm-edged definitions to. And I think it's, that's, I suppose, an interesting difference between, in an operational sense, you kind of know what urgent is, you know what off supply is, but you don't need to absolutely define it. Whereas for us, we spent a lot of time going backwards and forwards, being like, does this person count as off supply because this and this has happened? And I'm not sure if it was interesting for you, but it was interesting for us.
I think though that's what's helped, Andy, see the work you've done, and this is really from the start, having the user group, the feedback group. So you've been able to get feedback from caseworkers, from a team manager, from George. So it's quite good, because I think at times what you'll see is you get different perspectives. And probably when you're going through that work as well, even across caseworkers, you get slightly different perspectives. I think that's an interesting point when you're going through the project. But ultimately you have to bring them together, don't you? And go, right, this is what we're defining in this area.
So I'm going to ask a last question now. Wondering if everyone can think about one piece of advice that you would give other organisations looking to implement this sort of AI in a public service.
Well, from my point, I would just say make sure that you see what your kind of current systems do, and what kind of benefits you get out of that. And I suppose the second thing would be for you just to make sure you've got the right team in place and I think we learned that really early on in the project. Make sure that you've got sign off from different sides of the business, like you've got your data governance, you've got somebody on the ground to lead the project, like myself, that you're working with the right tech partner, and then you've got the funding, I suppose, to deliver what it is that you're you're looking to do. Because you start a project like this, you don't have the right team in place, it would easily be derailed because you need lots of minds sort of looking after the different areas of the business to sort of get the ultimate goal.
The only thing I would add to what George has said, because I think that was pretty comprehensive, is just, make sure that this is part of your business plan. Like, in terms of time, you really need dedicated time and a commitment that, to enable this, to drive the project. And if you're bringing this in with several others that you're starting at the same time, or it's a pretty busy period, then it just makes it so much more difficult. So I would absolutely propose that kind of planned approach and making sure that you're not trying to do too much at the one time.
Yeah, I'd like to say there's such a large part of a project like this is on the client side is the operations and management. So we've been super lucky to have that continued buy-in through the project and continued level of engagement week in, week out. Because on the one hand, we're seeing these amazing breakthroughs in AI, amazing abilities in language processing, but to bridge that gap between like what's theoretically possible and what's actually delivering impact at the front line, it needs all that work in between of management, service design, information governance, system thinking, that I think it has to be a team effort.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Natasha Gilmour and George Holmes from Citizens Advice Scotland Extra Help Unit, and Andy Bell and myself, Angela Bradbury from HelpFirst.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
See ya.